That's the title. Yeah. Literary hype woman interviews the superherologist in the rain at Comic-Con.
The once in a decade Comic-Con rain.
Yeah, there we go. The pouring rain. I know you might not be able to tell it with this fancy camera, but it is just pouring down on us.
Hi and welcome to Literary Hype. I am Stephanie here, Literary Hype Woman, and I am so hyped about this author interview, because this is the third time that I've gotten to talk to Dr. Travis Langley, but it is the first time we've been on camera together in person. So it was a special moment for us to just sit there and talk all things nerdy, because he has a lot of books, so we're covering a lot of ground. Today we're talking about Stranger Things psychology, we are talking about Doctor Who psychology, and we are talking about Spider-Man psychology. So there's a lot to cover in this. There's something for everyone, no matter what your nerdy loves are. So check out this conversation with Dr. Travis Langley. So you've got 2 books out this year. And
I do.
How intense has this schedule been for you to put out 2 books and while you're working on another one?
Sometimes it is intense. These are topics I've thought about for years. The Spider-Man book is one I've wanted to do for a very long time. And the one right before that, Stranger Things, that was after a long break between books. Is after the Joker psychology in 2019, I needed a break. Not just from the pace of the books we'd been doing at roughly 3 a year, 2 or 3 a year. It was because of how intense the subject matter got in there, and how I'm having to look up things on some of the world's worst real criminals. I needed a break, and then lockdown turned that 6-month break into a 2-year break, and chaos happened with the publishing industry. So Stranger Things psychology was the first one in a while. And I actually wrote very little in that one, as I wrote a whole lot in the Spider-Man book, and I did not write a lot in the Stranger Things book. But everybody on the Stranger Things book was working because this is something they wanted to do, writing for it. All the money from it goes to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. This is something we'd wanted to do this for a long time, and Stranger Things seemed like the right book to do that. And yeah, there are times where I have to figure out, how am I pacing myself? The upcoming one later in the year is the second edition of a previous book. It was still a lot of work because there were other things I wanted to talk about it. So these things, this stuff. These are the 2023 books. Stranger Things, early in the year. Spider-Man psychology, untangling. Stranger Things.
Life Upside Down.
Pause on my own subtitle. Spider-Man Psychology, Untangling Webs, with foreword by Danny Fingeroth, whose book Superman on the Couch inspired me to do these kinds of books. And then later in the year, the first edition of Doctor Who, the subtitle, A Madman with the Box, no longer applies. Mm-hmm. So for the second edition, it's Doctor Who Psychology, Times Change. And there was a lot to write on there. If I do a second edition of one which will probably be one of the few high-profile movies coming out next year, look through my list, you can see which one that has to be. I've actually named it already. But if I do say, I don't think I'll have much to do on that one. I'll have some things to say about the movie with an Arthur Fleck character. You can do the math. But I won't have much, because I'm so happy with that book. There's not a lot to change. He didn't regenerate into She-Joker or anything like that. And that's a sexist way to put it. Don't say She-Joker. Comic books do that. Blame comics, not me.
Okay, let's go there, because that is an interesting note, that instead of giving them their own name, mm-hmm. It's She-Hulk and She-This, or...
Where it makes them derivative of a male character.
Yes.
No, they're part of that simply because they lead with the male characters, and there are many derivative characters coming from them. Mm-hmm. Not just Batgirl and Batwoman, but hey, there's also Bat-Hound, mm-hmm. and Bat-Cow. There's been a Bat-Cow. Yeah.
Spider-Ham.
Yes, Spider-Ham, and there's a Spider-Boy in the comics right now, and maybe also to keep anybody else from using that name. But then there's the Spider-Woman. There was a Spider-Woman long before there was a Spider-Man, though. Marvel had a Spider-Woman, or Timely, became Marvel, had a Spider-Woman back in the 40s. So he's derivative of her.
I like that. That sounds good.
But we do see a Wonder Man, but a different company where he's not derivative of Wonder Woman. And even Wonder Woman's own derivative characters are Wonder Girl, another Wonder Girl, and Hawk Girl, Bat Girl. Well, Invisible Girl wasn't derivative of another Marvel character, but derivative of the Invisible Man. And some of that will be because that's who they created first. But it doesn't happen a lot the other way. They create a Marvel Girl at comics who had nothing to do with the previous Marvel Boy. And she wasn't really derivative of Marvel Boy. It was used in the name. And no new Marvel Boy comes along who's a fan of Jean Grey. It's like we can't have the feminine wussy hero basing his style on the woman. Yeah, you go around Comic-Con, you can see there can be plenty of guys doing outfits that are derivative of female heroes, female villains. And you don't always think of it as gender bending either. Sometimes you're just impressed with what they come up with.
So how do you go about selecting the characters or shows that you want to focus on for these psychology books?
Starts with, what do I like? What do I want to invest that much time thinking about? What do we think we can have a good, solid thing to talk about, where we can bring something new and fresh and talk about the psychology of real human nature through these examples? Because it works both ways. Like the first one, Batman and psychology. The subsequent ones don't have the and in there. Like Spider-Man psychology. It's not the psychology of Spider-Man, because it's not just that. Yes, it's the psychology of Spider-Man, but it's also the Spider-Man of psychology. We're using psychology to look at Spider-Man, which is generally how people are buying the books. But then we're using Spider-Man to talk about the psychology of real human nature. And so what is worth talking about? Sometimes somebody will suggest a topic, and it might be one that's like, I don't see what new message we can have in there. It would be a perfectly good topic. It's The Last of Us. Yes, there are some new things worth talking about with The Last of Us, but still, a whole lot of it we talked about in previous books, especially The Walking Dead psychology. Again, it's more about the human beings. You go long stretches of not seeing zombies in The Last of Us, but still, what's new? And then, of course, there's what will the publisher let us? A lot of that end of it will have to do with the timing in the real world. What works in the real world? Because we do know from past experience, if one of these books comes out and it's not near a related media event, it does not sell as well. The Daredevil book came out well after a season, and the Westworld book came out nowhere near a season, and those were the two worst selling ones in the bunch.
That's just sad.
It's
the timing is so important
with
your book releases.
Yeah.
Especially when it is tied to something like this, you have more. So that's why you've rushed.
Well, it's not rushed. It's been in my head for many years. There's no rush on that Spider-Man book. Has there ever been one I actually thought of it as rushed? No, the timing on some, like one of the reasons Daredevil came out when it was is because I felt we needed more time to do the book right. Regardless, it's like, yes, I knew it would sell better if it came out the same time as the start of the season, but I knew we need a little more time to do this book right. So on my end, well, that matters more. But you got to keep your publisher happy if you want them to keep publishing your books too.
This is very true. How do you go about selecting the team that's going to work on a particular topic and character and what they're going to write about?
They said they wanted to get involved if I did more, so that's what led to us doing these anthologies. There have been people who I've found their blogs, maybe their vlogs, but I have found it's definitely better with the blog. Some of the vloggers aren't as confident about the writing. Even though I listen to them speak, it's like, just write down what you said. That's all you have to do. Or even one of us could co-author it with you to help it shape it. But bloggers, some of them are recruited from their Psychology Today blogs. I knew that, okay, you know how to write for a general audience. Not in a way where you're just trying to impress your fellow academicians, or it's too casual. It's more of a magazine level tone, I think, in how we're talking to the audience. So there are those, and then there are those who walk up to me in convention and say, "How can I get involved in these books?" I say, "Well, this is a start," and then we talk for a while and we see how I feel about them. And some of them have been the best writers along the way. A couple of them have been among the few people whose chapters end up getting rejected even after we've gone through a few rounds of it. I always hate doing that. But and then we've accumulated people. We've got a lot of people. So when there's a new topic, first I ask the ones we've already had, which of you are interested in this one? And what would you have to say? First of all, what would they want to talk about? If one just saying, I'm in, it's like, okay, what would you want to talk about? And how does that differ from what you've talked about before? How is it different from what somebody else would talk about? Build from that, and then I look at it and see, okay, what are the gaps? What kind of topics are really important here that are missing? Maybe it's something I'll write about. And how much room do I have to recruit some others? Stranger Things, especially with us agreeing we're not taking pay, I didn't recruit any strangers. Everybody was somebody that I already knew. Most had written in the previous books. A few I knew from doing convention panels together, though. So I still knew how they think about things, how they talk about things, and they were all folks I knew because I was not going to ask a stranger, hey, you want to do this one for free?
So when you're preparing to write one of these books, you've got to watch the shows, obviously. How does doing these books and thinking about the concepts from a psychologist perspective change how you watch content in general?
Yeah, that is also why there's some I would never do because I don't want to think about them that way. Somebody was asking me the other day about a particular TV show that they loved and I had not yet watched, but from what I knew of it, it's like, if I watch that one, I think I want to just watch it for fun. I mean, no, I can't help but think about certain things because that's how I think, but always have, even before I was writing these books. But there are things I just want to take in. I just want to enjoy, and I don't want to get into them in that way. And yeah, there is the difference. There is the show you're watching, and you hope you're having fun with all of these to begin with. Some topics, okay, it's a little bit much to say you're having fun watching a serial killer movie, or one that we're working on for next year. Saying, man, that show is fun would be a little twisted. It might rhyme with The Bandmaid's Tale.
Ooh.
Yes, that's. I have found that one makes me crankier when I'm working on parts of it.
Understandable.
Yeah.
That one's gonna be very interesting.
And that is partly because Wynn Goodfriend, who is the one person in the bunch who has written chapters in more of this kind of book than I have, because she wrote chapters in 6 or 7 Ben Bella popular culture psychology books about 2006. Like she had a chapter in the Psychology of Harry Potter. That one when I was particularly impressed with her and looked up some of her others. That's why I invited her to join us on these after I'd done a couple of these books, and she just thanked me so much because once Ben Bella stopped doing those, she felt something was missing from her life. And she and others have a passion for the importance of the topic, and you pull for the characters and you feel for them, and there are very strong, important messages in there. And she was going to be doing that this year, and regardless of whether I was involved. So that's why I'm working with her to work with the people that we have and produce if we're doing a Bandmaid's Tale book for 2024. It has not been announced yet. So
we got the scoop.
Well, also,
Ish.
I'm trying to suggest that it's like the publisher might want to sit on it till we know when the next season's coming out.
Yeah, since that will be the final season.
And the strike the writer's strike had already interrupted. And if these strikes go to January or whatever, that's throwing off the schedule for everything.
I mean, the strike has been a massive topic of conversation here. How will that affect your release times in the future, or will it at all?
It will. There's a book I really want to do for 2 years from now, and a producer friend of mine said, you really should put that off a year. It gives me more time to think about it. It's one of those up there with Batman and Spiderman on how much I've really, really wanted to do this topic.
So when you're watching something for the first time, are you like automatically flagging stuff in your mind of this could be a good topic, or do you try to turn that all off?
I'm watching them to watch them. I'm still going to be analyzing some things. It's like that. It's like that's not true to human nature. It's like what that character's doing. And then there are things where other people go, like, man, that doesn't seem real. And go, no, actually it is. In The Walking Dead, when all the characters are split up in different places after they've lost the prison, and Beth is missing, and Maggie's not talking about Beth. I saw people on Twitter talking about it. It was like, man, why isn't Maggie talking about Beth? That seems pretty unrealistic. It's like, no, because talking about the possibility that Beth might be dead means acknowledging that Maggie might be the last living member of her own family. And there are plenty of people who will avoid talking about such things. The character knew it, but it's like she didn't talk about it because she got to she got to not face that yet. Because once Beth did die, spoiler from a decade ago, once Beth died, it's like Maggie, she goes into serious depression and is affected by it. And when fans are having these kinds of conversation, right there, that's why these books work. As a fan, when you go, why are they doing that? Or it's like, oh, how's that affecting them? It's like, oh, he's all messed up. And it's like, these are psychological concerns and thoughts. And I do it with some jargon.
In your Stranger Things psychology book,
yes,
you mentioned that psychology is not just about mental health, and
right,
that kind of how people think of them as the same thing. How are you hoping that your books help open eyes to what these differences are?
That is part of it. I really want people to understand psychology is the science of everything we do. It is looking at human nature, and for some, non-human nature. I'm interested in the human side of it mostly. It is the psychology of growing up, psychology of relationships, healthy and unhealthy. Either way, it is the psychology of why you want to have a conversation with somebody on a microphone in front of a camera. It's like, why are you doing that? That's a topic of motivation, or maybe personality. What is it that drives her to do these things? Who is she as a person? What's motivating her? These are psychological issues. And that's not a bad thing. When you call something a psychological issue, that does not have to mean mental problem. It could just mean a question about people.
It's such a fascinating topic, and the way that you work these books to show, it's like a textbook but with really fun examples.
Mm-hmm. They're more fun than a textbook.
They are. It's just like I take my time with these ones because you got to think about things. Kind of one of the main themes is belonging.
Yes.
Comic-Con is a place where a lot of people come to belong. Kind of talk
a
little
good
bit about
tie in there.
Kind of talk a little bit about how events like Comic-Con bring us together.
First time I came to San Diego Comic-Con was 2007, and I'm looking around this place and seeing people so animated and alive in an environment that celebrated topics that they might feel ostracized over at home. And I knew I've got to be part of this. The next couple of years, brought students and we did some research, and we did survey research. We were able to collect data for about a year and a half, and then everybody's too busy staring into their phones to want to answer a survey. But before that, they're standing in long lines with nothing else to do, and here, do a survey. Okay. But looking at what it does for people, the most important part is not, you right there watching it. Maybe you want to spend all your time in Hall H, and that's great. Maybe your interest is buying the exclusive items that are here, and if that's what you love and enjoy, that's great. To me, the convene in convention is about people. The most important stuff is conversation with people after hours. When I was at dinner last night, I was commenting about that as I was with friends that I only see once in a while, or I'm making new friends, and that's what to me it really needs to be about. And it is about that feeling of belonging, connecting with others, even if you feel pretty happy with the people in your life, in the environment that you're in. There's still parts of yourself that you can't always discuss, topics that nobody around you gets. Or you make a wisecrack, and man, if you'd been with the right crowd, somebody might have laughed, besides just yourself. It's like, well, that was for me. And that can happen here too anyway, but one of the things, you don't have to have the same interest as somebody else here, but you have an interest, you have a passion, or you wouldn't be here short of getting dragged along with somebody else. It's expensive for just getting dragged along with somebody else, unless
Really
you have the kind of badges we have. But it is about that connecting, that human quality, and Stranger Things. So many shows are about finding people to connect with, but Stranger Things over and over is like this person making friends, feeling isolated from their own closest friends, how to reconnect with friends, making new friends. Do we accept Max into the group? It's like, do we just act like everything's fine with Will when he's gone through having been dead for a while? Robin, who worries, she tells Steve early in season 4, it's like, yeah, you hit on the wrong girl. It's just one experience. I hit on the wrong girl. I'm the town pariah. Mm-hmm. For all we know, when she came out to Steve the previous season, that's the first person she's come out to. We don't know. There are all kinds of things with Robin's life we don't know. We know she has other friends. We've picked up on some aspects of that, but we don't know. We still don't know a lot about her life, but that very human connection. My favorite moment in the whole series is when she and Steve are sitting on the floor in the bathroom, and this coming out moment where she tells him. It takes him a moment to realize, because he's not the smartest character, and he gets this. Oh, he's hanging his head, thinking, and our attention at that moment is on him because we're waiting to see how he reacts. If you watch it again, look at her while you're waiting to see how he reacts, and her face. She's just hanging, like she knows she screwed everything up. She's blown it. She knows she's going to be rejected. And then when he starts just kind of kidding with her like a buddy, it's like when she's laughing and there are a few tears, it is not just joy of that moment, but relief. And the feeling is like, I am connected. I'm more connected now than I was before because I can be honest about this part of myself. And throughout Stranger Things, like in Comic-Cons, a lot of it is about finding ways to be true to yourself. Even the person in costume, they're finding a way to be true to themselves by declaring this thing they love. You might think the costume is a way of hiding who you love. Not generally around here. It's a way about being even more yourself, or a part of yourself. Let this part run wild.
Have you done any research on the psychology of why people pick what cosplays to do?
No. And I won't. There are some people, Robin Rosenberg, Drea Letamendi have done some research on cosplay. Some other people have. And people keep saying, would you do a book on the psychology of cosplay? No. There is too little objective research to make straightforward objective statements about this. With so little empirical research, most of it would be speculating based on other things. And even if I'm mostly saying, yes, it's healthy and it's wonderful, like some of the previous research has suggested, all it takes is one thing you've said in there wrong, and somebody takes that and uses it the wrong way. Even if it's pro cosplay, I still see the potential for it to do more damage than good. I do believe there's a way to do it very well. I don't think I'm the person to do it. So I don't. One of the things about analyzing the fictional characters as a way to talk about real human nature, I'm not directly talking about any specific real people. The American Psychological Association has a lot of guidelines about when it comes to publicly speculating on real people. And even if they're well-known public figures, you have to be cautious. It's not like you personally know them. You've got to make statements, okay, based on what I see here. It's like this political candidate's narcissistic seeming behavior. Like there's been one particular political candidate that our guidelines on the Psychology Today blog tell us is if anyone wants to talk about so-and-so, you have to be really careful. You can guess.
Talk a little bit about how these books make psychology accessible to people who might not find a way into this area of studying or learning about this, but they're interested in it because of the superheroes and the shows that they love.
Yeah, sometimes we're sneaking up that knowledge.
Sneaky learning.
I go through talking about PTSD with a particular character and say which symptoms they fit, which symptoms as normally depicted they do not fit. It's right there. It's a different look at the character, but I'm also showing them that PTSD is not exactly what they thought it was. And so we are teaching them these things about what's known about these other people while analyzing the characters. All throughout all the books, we are doing that over and over. If you think you're not interested in psychology, you're wrong, unless you have no interest in understanding anybody, even yourself. If you're interested in understanding anyone, you are interested in psychology, actually. You are asking questions that are psychological questions. And so we're pulling in things from, sometimes we're talking about what somebody has theorized, and I've had a couple of Freudians where I have to keep telling them, according to Freud. Freud thought. Unless you can find some empirical research that backed that one up, you've got to emphasize that that was Freud's opinion, but a very well-known opinion, and therefore still we're talking about. Most of it is still heavily focused on what we've pulled from actual empirical information about people. They're just all over there. Any topic we get into whatsoever.
So one of the interesting kind of breakdowns that you have in the Spider-Man book is the psychotic, neurotic, psychopathic, and the differences, because those words get used crisscrossed all over the place.
Not as badly as they used to, but man, it used to be that if I heard the word psychotic or psychopathic in a movie, it was 50-50 as to which one they actually meant.
Talk a little bit about what those mean, and then how that relates to the Spider-Man.
It's read the book, find out. No, psychotic, you're out of touch with reality, like you're hallucinating, you're delusional. You see your friend as being a two-headed monster. That's a hallucination. You think you are a two-headed monster. That's a delusion. That is severely out of touch with reality. Not just a little wrong. We all have things where we're a little wrong on. You can be wrong without it being something that is abnormally distorted from anything anybody else would think or believe. So hallucinations, delusions, those are the main examples of psychotic symptoms. The person is severely out of touch with reality, at least on certain things. It may not be everything. They may be delusional, but otherwise not psychotic. Those are actually more dangerous than the broadly psychotic ones, because they've got the belief that's out of touch with reality, but they know to hide the weapon while they're, most psychotic individuals are not out to hurt anybody. If they're a danger, it's to themselves first. Neurotic, it's sometimes a catch-all for all unhealthy stuff that's not psychotic. It basically means you're handling stress poorly. Spider-Man has been referred to as the poster boy for the neurotic superhero because of how stress weighs on him so heavily all the time. He's driven by guilt. He uses humor as a coping mechanism. But one of the things I do say in there is that calling Spider-Man the poster boy for the neurotic superhero, I think, is calling him the poster boy for the human superhero. Important part of just being a human being is that you're not perfect, is that you are driven by stress, sometimes in very good and important and healthy ways. You need to deal with anxiety. The less healthy it is, the more neurotic it is, from the old use of the word neurotic. While neurotic is technically not a modern diagnostic term, not DSM, it's still used plenty. There are clinicians who use it, and it's very much in the popular language. And then psychopathic, you don't have empathy. If you go with the older definition, you don't have conscience. There's two main ways of looking at it. Dancing around evil, but that's a little extreme. You can have somebody who has no empathy for anybody, but they don't actively delight in hurting others either. So that's different. You throw in sadism, now we're moving to okay. Now we are talking a little more evil.
Yeah. So Spider-Man's kind of regarded as like the everyman hero, and the one that's kind of the most relatable. Talk a little bit, and it's something you touch on in the book about how much Stan Lee put himself into Spider-Man. Talk a little bit about how Stan Lee was such a great storyteller by kind of revealing parts of himself through Spider-Man. Okay,
and before we get people cursing us for even saying that, yes, Steve Ditko did most of the plotting. And because we absolutely cannot downplay the importance of Steve Ditko in those original stories. But if you ever read Ditko's writing elsewhere, you'll know that the humor was not Ditko's. So many. If you compare the writing in the Spider-Man stories to Ditko's stories elsewhere, where we know he wrote the text as well, you can see differences. There is a lot of Stan's own perspective in there. Stan's uncertainties and his humor and desire to feel more full of himself. It's like he puts that in these characters, and yeah, there's pain. I asked Stan once, like, why so many of the superheroes are orphans, and he thought about it for a moment. And John Romita Jr.'s there, and he starts speculating why. And Stan's like, I'm trying to think if they were or were. It's like and Stan said and he had some reasons, specific reasons with Spider-Man and Daredevil, because it was very integral to their origins. He wanted Peter Parker to have a tough life. And he said, but otherwise he didn't think about it. During lockdown, I was doing a panel with Brian Michael Bendis, who's written a lot of Spider-Man stories, more than anybody else. 100 issues more than Dan Slott, and he will not let Slott forget that. And Bendis was making a comment about, it's about the orphan quality. He brought up the orphan issue and how that's so important in these stories. And I told him about my conversation with Stan and how Stan said I didn't really think about it. And Brian said, when Stan says, I didn't really think about it, I think that's the real truth. I think that's where when he says I didn't think about it, because otherwise he can tell you what he was thinking on all sorts of other things, or at least what he now thinks he thought back then. But when he says I didn't think about it and gives you that short answer, it's like, no, that's where the real pain is. And he said you can't make that up.
So what would you say is the biggest psychological takeaway from Stranger Things and Spider-Man?
Stranger Things, make friends. Friends stick together.
Friends don't lie.
Yes, they do. Otherwise, you're hurting your friends' feelings all the time. That's true.
It's true.
That's
You're
what
not wrong.
There are higher priorities on that. It's like, how does this make me look? And sometimes they need to know the truth, and sometimes they need to know the one that makes them feel good. It's like, if they're enjoying it, let them enjoy it. Spider-Man, it's that thing I said earlier. The big takeaway is that poster boy for the most neurotic superhero is the poster boy for the human superhero.
Awesome. Do you want to say anything about the Doctor Who book? Because I've not had a chance to read this one yet. Is there anything special we should know?
The Doctor's been a woman since the last edition, but that's not all. That is not all. There are other changes in there. I had to take some chapters out. Although the ones I took out, saving them for a completely different Doctor Who book I really want to do. I want to do a completely separate, so a sequel to that one, or different book. It could be read first. When I was kind of late in the process when it hit me that I really need to do a chapter about the Doctor's love life to tie some things together, especially what's gone on in recent years, like with the fugitive Doctor having a husband. And other things in the Doctor's experience, and what is the Doctor's interest in some of these companions. So there's that whole new chapter on the Doctor's love life. Justine Maston wrote a chapter on the gender issues, but there are some other major changes in some of them. And then there are chapters like where one writer had gone through and analyzed every Doctor on the Myers-Briggs type indicator. Even though somewhere else in there, we also have another writer saying Myers-Briggs type indicator is crap. We got both their views in there. I even say at the beginning, we may disagree with each other at times. But she analyzed the previous ones, like, well, it's incomplete without the newest. Or without the Jodie Whittaker Doctor, and at least acknowledging why we don't have enough information on somebody like the fugitive Doctor to add that an acknowledgement in there. Another chapter where they'd gone through and analyzed all these Doctors, and if either that chapter had to be cut or we needed to add something on the newest. So there are the updates. There are new things that have crossed our minds. And I just had so much fun working on this second edition of the Doctor Who book. When I did the second edition of the Batman book, it was like visiting an old friend. But that was with some things that had been staying with me for 10 years and brewing that I got to put in there. And I figured 10 years later I'll have another one. But with the Doctor Who book, I'd always expected to do another Doctor Who book. There are a couple of them where I marked editing copy all along the way to make notes because I expected to revisit. And that was one I've always expected to revisit. And I'm very glad we got the chance to do it. And I think it's outstanding.
I almost forgot to say this. With the Spider-Man book, you co-edited this with your son. How much fun was that?
Nepotism! What in the world is wrong with that guy? Answering your question, a lot of fun, but it's Alex. I put it to the writers that because of our schedule, I've asked about the schedule earlier, I knew I'm going to need a co-editor on the Spider-Man book because it's overlapping with working on the Doctor Who book and wrapping up things on Stranger Things. Because they overlap in the edits.
As it does when you have 3 books coming out in a year.
Yeah, like this weekend, I'm finishing proofing the index for the final print for the official print of the Doctor Who book, because the one you got has no index. I'm making that's my last edit on that one while working on Bandmaid's Tale and figuring out what we're doing next. Usually there are 3 in progress. Right now there are 2 because of some chaos. Alex. But I put it to the writers. I mentioned to them I'm going to need a co-editor on this one. And there was one particular writer I thought would want to do it, but Alex was the one who said he wanted to do it. And I told him outright, the fact that my son is going to make it harder for you to convince me. But he had the knowledge. Man, he has the knowledge of Spider-Man, and the old stories
where
and
he
later.
got that from.
There's that. And he had a vision for what we should do with the book, and the knowledge and the experience with the writing. He's got to have a dozen books of his own, even aside from writing chapters in some of these along the way. And then I turned it back to the writers, and they all agreed completely that he was absolutely the person to do it. It's been fun being able to just chat with him and talk with him about these things along the way, and figuring out most of our writing. Well, with this one, we wrote a lot more than in some of the other books, and so some of our chapters we wrote earlier on, but I don't do most of my writing until after I've at least seen drafts of what everybody else is doing, so I have a better sense of what fills in. But he and I, there were some topics we'd bounce around a bit, and then we go, okay, which one of us is going to write this chapter? And it's his chapter. My chapters have plenty of ideas from him in them, and vice versa. And that's one of the things when you're working with somebody whose family, it's you're working with somebody who they know you. It's okay. You're hiring somebody to sell cars. Really? Do you need family to do that? Well, they need a job. But on a creative thing, on something involving a lot of thought, selling cars can involve a lot of thought. The sales pitch can involve creativity. But it really helps to have somebody who does understand your preferences and who sees eye to eye. You want some people who argue with you too, but also the person who you can see eye to eye with you on some key things.
The last question we always ask is, because this is literary hype, what books are you hyped about right now?
Oh, that's right. We've done this before. What I'm doing right now, I'm going through and reading Treasuries of Pearls Before Swine. Okay. The comic strip by Stefan Pastis, who almost did a panel with me once upon a time. But the convention, he was a special guest at the convention, and they scheduled him for something else that overlapped.
Well, that's a bummer.
Yeah, but
always a pleasure having you on and getting to talk to you.
Always a pleasure. Hey, I've talked to her more than once. That means, we both was like, okay, well, that was all right.
Yes, this is our 3rd time interviewing, but this is the first time we've been on camera together.
Yeah.
In person. So this was a treat.
Yes, it is.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye, bye, bye.
Thanks again to Dr. Langley for taking time out of his San Diego Comic-Con schedule to talk all things nerdy psychology with me. It's always a pleasure to talk to him, and it's always so much fun, so I really appreciate him taking the time to do this for a 3rd time. The first time was for solely news, 2nd time was news/literary hype as I was just getting this channel started, and now we're a year into this channel and getting to talk about 3 books. So if you want to get a hold of any of these 3 books, which I highly recommend you do, these are so great. The links to get his books are down below in the description, which is also where you can find where to follow him on social media. I mean, he's the Superherologist. Why would you not want to be checking this out? Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. It really does mean a lot to me to have you along on this bookish journey with me. Until next time, I'll see you later.